This is Rudy Giuliani back again with you with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. This episode is going to follow on to a certain extent to the last one we did and be somewhat different. The last episode, we talked about how works of fiction can predict the future. And we used 1984 and Brave New World as the works of fiction to show us, illustrate for us something that I think we all sense is happening, but are not sure, but to show us how the Biden Democrat, new tech, big business, big Democrat Party cabal running our government, the leadership, is moving us inexorably towards socialism and maybe even communism. Because these are exactly the predictions made in Orwell and Huxley's books many, many years ago. And it's rather on the mark. And then you can go back actually then to Marx and Engels and Lenin and look at their guideposts for how to move toward a communist government. And you see that we're hitting them, not us. The Biden people are hitting them or proposing them. So now we're going to look at it from a different point of view. It's related, but needs its own treatment. It's this theory, for many of you new, called critical race theory. Exactly what is it? I mean, the name, as all of these names that come out of the school of propaganda, could mean anything, just like Black Lives Matter sounds. Of course, Black Lives Matter. You'd probably say in response to that in normal conversation, well, so do all lives, but yes, of course, Black Lives Matter. But that doesn't tell you anything about Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist, Leninist-led organization by extremely confirmed communists, completely confirmed atheist, completely confirmed radical gay, lesbian, and now all of the other gender activists, where the Black Lives Matter part of it is almost a footnote to their desire to overthrow the government and make us into a 100 gender country with no private property, and well, basically to make us into a socialist communist government that is the goal of, if you say you're a dedicated Marxist operative, I know where you're going and I can see what you're doing. So this critical race theory is somewhat a little bit different. I mean, it gets put in sort of in a leadership position now, because it's been going on for some time, because slowly but surely the President of the United States has now made it abundantly clear that he believes we're an evil country. One time, two times, three times, maybe for him it's a slip of the tongue, but going back now a year, Biden has consistently said in his interview with Norah O'Donnell, he volunteered. She just asked about law enforcement. He volunteered. No, absolutely, the whole country's racist. He did the same thing in a speech that he gave shortly thereafter. He did the same thing during the debate when he was being asked about it. He volunteered that it's not only law enforcement, all of our society is systemically racist. In his inauguration address, he referred to it. Once before the conviction of George Floyd, he referred to us as a systemically racist nation. And then when he had the microphone and the whole world listening, his second paragraph was the systemic racism the vice president just referred to, the systemic racism that is a stain to our entire nation's soul. Well, that's a very extraordinary statement from a head of state attacking his own country for being an evil, amoral, immoral country. Systemic racism means pervasive racism. Systemic racism means that racism is the rule, not the exception. Individual racism means there are some racists, but most of society is not. Systemic racism means most of society is, and being a fair, balanced, unbiased person is the exception. He's saying about America that it is overwhelmingly the case that we can be defined by racism, not by our extraordinary liberty, our extraordinary sacrifices to bring liberty to people we never knew and left our children there buried in foreign graves and took no property for it. We're not defined by our courageous fight for liberty, even if they were slave owners, some people of their times, some extraordinarily guilty about it, like Jefferson, some having freed their slaves, and some of them, like Hamilton and Adams, extremely fierce abolitionists. We don't seem to get credit for the Civil War, in which that war was fought, and many, many more white lives by a large number were sacrificed. Part of the goal of it, eventually the goal of it, was to free the slaves because we were so morally repulsed by it. There were setbacks along the way to get to full civil rights eventually, but there were always champions, white champions as well as black champions, of the full meaning of what Jefferson and Madison and Jay put there about we're all being equal. There was always a contradiction built right into the Constitution. And finally, of course, the Civil Rights Act, which needed critical Republican votes to pass, and we can go on and on and on. So now we're at a different stage, and it is rather extraordinary for someone to say this country is systemically racist. It is completely outrageous for the president and vice president of the United States to accuse their country of such evil. One wonders why they want to be the leader of such a country that's so evil as to hate people, or to have a majority of us who hate people. I mean, this leads to enormous foreign policy problems. Our new representative to the United Nations, who's supposed to put America in the best light possible, which isn't hard if you're talking to China, Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea and Saudi Arabia. I mean, whatever our problems on human rights, racism considered also, we are a model of humanity compared to China. Slaughter of girls, killed more people than any country, certainly in the history of the modern world, killed more of their own people. They killed girl babies. They put Muslims in concentration camps, 3 million. Where we got to apologize to that? Cuba? You know what Cuba has done. I know people who have been tortured by Castro. I imagine most of you do too. We're talking to Venezuela, who are presently torturing people. North Korea? You've got to be kidding. And Venezuela? Well, here's what this woman representing us, and she is technically representing me, not my ideas. She says in front of this group of dictatorships that trample over human rights and slaughter human life at will. Might as well have Iran there. Maybe she should send a BCC to Iran. Linda Thomas Greenfield is her name. And she wanted to tell the Human Rights Council, which is made up of these violators of human rights. She says to them, the original sin of slavery weaved white supremacy into our founding documents, that we are an imperfect union, and we must approach issues of equity and justice at the global scale with humility, because we are sinners. This is, she probably plagiarized this from Obama's apology tour. I think I remember him saying something like this. Oh, we're terrible, we're awful. We're just as bad as you are. We're just as bad as you are, China. So therefore, if we tell you that you shouldn't be killing 3-4 million Uyghurs in China, you shouldn't do that. That's not nice. Shouldn't do it. And if you yell and scream at Anthony Blinken and he puts his eyes down, I know it was good he didn't cry. It looked like he was. But he puts his head down and he walks out with his tail between his legs. We understand. I mean, of course, we did pretty much the same things, right? Right? Wrong. I don't think I have to do the rest of this, which is to prove to you what liars they are, to prove to you that what they did is reprehensible as an American, to attack my country for being mostly an immoral country, to attack the country that has brought more freedom, more liberty, more human rights to the world than any country in the history of the world, to attack my country who has gone to other countries to liberate them And unlike the Greeks and the Romans and the Mongols and the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire, who did the same thing and took land, property, and wealth, what did we take? We freed very rich countries. We freed France. We freed Italy. We freed Germany. We freed all of Western Europe. And we have many, many interrupted human lives buried in the soil of those countries. And Colin Powell said it best, a patriotic American. And all we asked for is not land, not wealth, not preference. All we asked for was a piece of ground. Now, that's a great country. And if you want to tear our country down with some narrative exaggerating our wrongdoing, of which there was wrongdoing, there's certainly more than explains the transformation we made, which should be celebrated as an example for countries like China and Russia, instead of idiots putting us in the same position as them. There is no moral equivalent between the United States of America, China and Russia, and North Korea and Iran. And to sit in that conference like Blinken did and to be scolded by a murderer immediately takes the United States and puts it back in 1 minute, exactly where Obama had us, following, not leading, apologizing, and not being proud of ourselves because they are not proud of America. They've been doing it for too long in too many places for me to think this is a fiction. They just go around spewing hatred for my country too much for me not to believe that this is a tactic. It's a tactic so they can bring about the substantial revolutionary changes in our government to make it the government they want. So, how do we stand by the courage of our convictions? How do we let this not happen to us? Let's first remember this critical racial theory is not a thing of today. This goes back directly to Marxism. Directly. Originally, the Marxist left built its political program on the theory of class conflict. That was the core of Marxism. It gets quite complicated, but if you keep your eye on the ball, class conflict, you'll see how it is a similar dynamic that can bring about the same result. These were industrial societies. So you had the workers, many, right? They were beginning to go through the Industrial Revolution. And you had the people who were the managers, higher managers in particular, and of course the owners. Those were the capitalists. And the capitalists were, under their theory, oppressing the workers. And on that basis, on that dynamic, on that fight, was the whole dynamic of how socialism and communism would emerge, because eventually the bourgeoisie, who were the capitalists, would be overthrown by the people. And the people would take control of the government. It would be owned by the people originally. All property would be owned by the people, no private property, and it would be shared equally. Of course, some minor exceptions had to be made to that in order to make decisions on who's going to work that day in the factory, how much output are we going to have, how are we going to make sure that people that are sick don't take advantage of that. Somebody has to be at the top of all this to relate to all the other governments that might be seeking to end this form of government. So right away, a hierarchy develops. Some communists are more equal than other communists. Some socialists are more equal than other socialists, because like everyone else, they have to be run. They can't run themselves. Certainly their businesses. Immediately, it becomes completely bastardized by that, because Marx, who was not only evil, but as foolish and as unrealistic as any liberal is, never thought of that. Just like they never think of how they're going to pay for things. let's give everybody free tuition, and then let's bankrupt everybody else. Let's give all the illegal immigrants health care. Gee, maybe a few more will come, like 100 million. But, we'll pay for that. We'll figure it out. And then what happens? Their countries and others go into bankruptcy. So, what do we do to combat this? Well, the first thing I think we have to do is we have to fight back against the destruction of the teaching of history that has occurred under our nose without our major objection for 30 years, and now aggressively so with this 1619 program that the New York Times has put together, which basically begins to be part of the critical race theory, which is that slavery defines America, and therefore, having started with slavery, we will never be a good country. Everything we did, everything we accomplished is not able to expiate the sin of slavery, and it was the most important thing in our founding. So let's see what we can do about this. How can we, now that we see this more clearly, how can we oppose it, stop it, slow it down, get this evil out of American life, this march toward evil? Because as our young people don't know, socialism and communism always leads to evil. There's no ideology that I can think of in the history of the modern world, including Nazism, that has taken the lives of more innocent people than communism. If we consider Russia, if we consider China, if we consider Cuba, if we consider Venezuela, Nicaragua, Vietnam, those areas of the world, the slaughters that were done, right down to the killing of girl infants by the cruel Chinese communists, not people. We have to protect ourselves against this. And we can see in the attitude of these people who are beginning to become more and more, socialism has two parts to it. And so does communism. One part is we share with everybody. And then what emerges from that almost necessarily is somebody's more important than somebody else because they have to guide it. They have to manage it. They have to organize it. They have to make the calls for the material. They have to decide on what the price is. They suddenly become more important. As soon as that happens, what emerges in people is this desire they have to control other people comes out. And when they get there that way, they're some of the worst ones. You can see it. You can see it with our Democrat governors. You can see it with some of the government people who suddenly have power. And when they deliver that message about wearing the mask, it isn't, would you please wear your mask? It's, put your mask on. What liberals don't do, which I include in socialists and communists, I once again will tell you, they're impractical. They do not know how to govern. Not too many examples of a committed liberal, lefty, who ever ran any government efficiently and effectively and for the benefit of the people. That makes them frustrated. They're not often in power. People who are not often in power, particularly if they have other little problems, start to become petty little dictators. We got a lot of them right now, and we got a couple of ones that are moving toward big dictators. I think this would be a good time to take a break. Your credit card company found suspicious charges on your card. That's simple identity theft. It's annoying, but they cover it. The type of fraud you really need to worry about is home title theft, a devastating crime that takes you off your home's title. And you're not covered by insurance or most identity theft programs. That's why you need Home Title Lock. Here's how easy it is for cyber criminals to get you. The title documents to our homes are kept online. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you just sold your home, and he's the new owner. Then he borrows money using your home's equity and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with your home's title, they help shut it down. Let's get you protected. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. And enter Rudy for 30 free days of protection. That's promo code Rudy at HomeTitleLock.com. Welcome back to our discussion of critical race theory. How did this critical race theory emerge? Somewhere in the 1980s, 1990s, academics using this Marxist dialectic, this Marxist program, just made some alterations in the titles, right? So the bourgeoisie, the leaders, the capitalists became the white male. And the proletariat became African Americans, and then other discriminated against minorities. But the class conflict was not a class conflict. It wasn't even really between the rich and the poor. It was between races. The white supremacists raced against the races that they hated, and in the order in which they hated them the most: black, brown, etc. That's the critical race theory. It gained adherence because a lot of people would hear it and nobody would tell them its Marxist root. It's only recently that people know the Marxist root of Black Lives Matter, which comes out of this, actually. And like communism, the critical race theory rejects equality, and it uses instead the word equity. It's a major difference. What democracy promises from the time of its invention as, the liberal democracy, the philosophers of Western civilization, what it promises is freedom for unfettered opportunity. You can take your drive, your work ethic, your talents, your creativity, and your courage as far as you can go. And it's unfair to put things in the way of that. And you should be judged on your merits. That was a big part of the civil rights movement. When Martin Luther King says, judge a man not by the color of his skin, by the quality of his character. Not the black man's better than the white man, or the white man's better than the black man, or vice versa. That's equality. Equity is you guarantee the result. All black people should be in exactly the same position as all white people, and all white people should be in exactly the same position as all brown people, and vice versa. And we become an endless division and subdivision of people by identity. We never become one America. We don't even become one America with ethnic backgrounds like we used to be, Italian Americans, and Irish Americans, and German Americans, and who integrated. We become identity separates us because there's no movement toward integration. It's just the opposite. So equity becomes the major principle of critical race theory. Clearly. I mean, you look at the early books on it. Cheryl Harris, UCLA law professor, this is what she defined as equity: suspending private property, seizing land and wealth, and redistributing them along racial lines. So that's communism / black entitlement. And look, communism in China was different than the communism in Russia, and communism in Cuba, different Venezuela. Each one of them makes a little change in it. And none of them are actually communism, because actually there were a lot of wealthy people in communism, sometimes more than in capitalist countries. So it always is a corrupt system and a bastardized system. But at least with regard to the mass of people, this is the suspend private property, seize land and wealth, redistribute them along racial lines, and of course the whole issue of reparations comes into that, to pay reparations. Ibram X. Kendi, who directs the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University and is one of the early creators of critical race theory, has proposed the creation of the Federal Department of Anti-Racism Just what we need, another federal department. This department would be independent, unaccountable to the elected branches of government. In other words, it would be a dictatorship and would have the power to nullify, veto, abolish any law at any level of government. Oh, and now I guess it would be much more easy to do this because the Democrats do it all the time, which is curtail the speech of political leaders and others deemed insufficiently anti-racist. So this group could go along and they could see me on television, and if I point out that the statistics actually show that the police kill more whites than blacks, and police officers are killed by blacks, oh my goodness, 9, 10, 15 times more than blacks shoot police officers, I would be taken off. Because even though I was telling the truth is not an issue. That's not a value in critical race theory or in Marxism. Anything that needs to be said to get to the greater good of a communist government, or here an anti-racist government, is to be done. There's no such thing as lying, which is why they stand truth on its face. And Orwell speaks about doublespeak and things like that. And Kendi, the same gentleman who is an author of the whole CRT theory, the whole CRT program, and the head of the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University, says in order to truly be anti-racist, you also have to be anti-capitalist. So now we have merged them together, right? So they are now aiming for the same goal that Marx was aiming for, the same goal as Trotsky, the same goal as the greatest murderer of all, Stalin, the same goal as Castro, the same goal as Maduro in Venezuela. Get rid of the capitalist system. Let's change the economic form of government. That means a revolution in America, right? It means we take my property away and yours, and we give it to who they believe deserves it. And if it isn't done correctly, the Center for Anti-Racist Research will decide that. Now, when you go back to the last episode, could be that we've gone beyond 1984 and Brave New World and the things that these people are recommending and we are teaching in school. So the form of government would end private property. It would end individual rights. They'd be all evaluated in terms of identity and race. Same thing with equality under the law, federalism, and freedom of speech. They'd all be subsumed under equality or equity for race, and therefore able to be violated if in any way it was deemed to violate racial equity. And this would be the authority to make these determinations actually have to be placed somewhere, and it would be placed in a omnipotent bureaucratic authority. Now, what are their beliefs that sort of bring this about? Their beliefs are that the white male culture is analogous to the KKK supremacist, that the whites are responsible for the mass killings, that the white male privilege is impossible for whites to do away with and exist today. And this has now become the operating thinking and the operating programs of our educational system. This is what your children are taught in many of the public schools. And they have conducted such a campaign in the public schools and on the media that in a recent Gallup poll, 77% of white Americans say they're afraid to state their public beliefs because of repercussions. If people were afraid in America to speak freely, I don't know, is it still America? Or how long is it going to remain America? So let's take a look. Let's take a look a little bit at what they believe, what is at the core, what's at the core of their thinking and believing. Because there's an excellent article in a magazine by an author who seems to be rather left-wing, says terrible things about Trump here. His name is Jonathan Chait, And it says, is the anti-racism training industry peddling white supremacy? And what he goes into is the work of these anti-racist trainers who are an offshoot of critical race theory in order to train. This is the retraining and re-education which is part of the Black Lives Matter program and the critical race theory program. We all have to go through retraining so we become deprogrammed from being racist, because whether I know it or not, I'm white, therefore I'm a racist. This is all written down, by the way. So these people have emerged. Daniel Bergner, this other woman, I think her name is Rosa D'Angelo, and then there's another one. They go around making these speeches and programs to companies, make a lot of money teaching them these things. And here's what they teach them. And this is essentially what's taught in the schools also. American society is shot through with multiple overlapping systems of racial bias. Shot through. Exposure to, this is racial bias now. Exposure to harmful pollution. Bias policing. Employment discrimination. But the anti-Semitism trainers go beyond denying the myth of meritocracy to denying the role of the individual merit altogether. Their teaching presents individuals as a racist myth. In their model, the individual is subsumed completely into racial identity. So, here's what that means. What that means is if the police are conducting the stop and frisk program, as they did for me, quite constitutionally, for years, and reduced gun crime by the most ever. If they stop, let's say, 7 out of 10 blacks in a city where blacks are no more than 10 or 15 out of 100, 10 or 15%, but they stop 70%. My goodness, that actually shows inequity. It has to be race, because they exclude no other reason for it. Because they don't want anything like the truth to get in the way of their theory, which is completely fallacious and completely inconsistent with human nature. So facts are not going to prove their theory. Facts are going to disprove their theory. This fact disproves their theory, but they yell it away. They scream it away. They use the charge of racist to get it away. And here's the answer to it. Blacks are stopped 7 times out of 10 because they commit somewhere between 7 to 8 out of 10 of the crimes for which people are stopped, particularly the murders. And they're not stopped usually when these arrests take place. Like every single one of these arrests that has been an issue has been because mostly the police were asked to go there. The Mabea Bryant arrest is a perfect example of that. The police were called up. They were told that they're told by a woman, I think it was being stabbed, that I'm going to be stabbed to death by a black woman. Now, they're not just picking out blacks and prowling the area. They're called in by blacks to come and help me, come and save me. What do you do? Not go? You send a social worker who's going to say to Mabea Bryant, as she's taking this knife and is about to stab Mabea looks like a big woman, and the other one, you can't tell. But Mabea is no small girl. She's got her arm out there. She's already been yelling and cursing. She's already been attempting to stab him. You got a call from a person who was afraid of being stabbed to death. What do you do, not go? Odds are you'd go, and after it was over, you pick up the dead body. Of course you've got to go. And you got to act, and you got to protect the innocent person. And that all gets... No, that's another statistic. Police shot and killed in this case, an armed black girl. That'll be the same in the statistics as the others. But didn't actually the police officer save a young black girl? Didn't he save her life? Isn't that what the community asked him to come there and do? They asked him to do it, and he did it. And this is how they distort the truth, distort reality. The same thing with unequal access to education. That's absurd. With all the affirmative action that's been done, by all the division of schools and the lowering of standards and the changing of standards, which even blacks object to, because it creates kind of a question about a degree or whatever, without even just the inherent desire of most Americans, which proves they're not racist, to try to help. I would say if you talk about Stuyvesant School, which is not a school of white privilege, it's a school of yellow privilege. It's mostly made up of Asians. They're about 60% of the population there, constantly objected to by the civil rights people. They're there on merit. They're there on merit. They perform better than the white kids and the black kids. So that's not racism. It would be racism to do the opposite. It'd be racism to say the Chinese and Japanese and Vietnamese and children who scored 20 points better than the whites and the blacks should be put behind them because of their race. That's racism. That's judging someone based on race. Unconstitutional in this country. Immoral in this country. You keep doing that, and that's your standard. You're systemically racist. Not the person who says, colorblind, like Martin Luther King wanted. Here are all the kids. Which ones can handle better and succeed better based on their scores and their performance? This very tough high school. Because we're not doing a kid any favor putting him into a high-performing high school where he fails. And this program, this dynamic that they have, it ends exactly where communism ends. It doesn't end. It always goes on, and it's totalizing and inescapable. There's no way out of it. We'll be right back. I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Welcome back to this very important issue. The African American History Museum has a page on whiteness, and they summarize all the terrible things about white culture. What does this white privilege mean? It means that we subject people to objective, rational thinking, that we subject them to cause and effect relationships. We subject them to hard work is the key to success. We subject them to plan for the future and delayed gratification. Objective, rational thinking, cause and effect, hard work is the key to success. Plan for the future and delayed gratification, that's racist? Hard work, rational thought, careful planning are just simply the keys to success. And if these very, very disturbingly motivated people, motivated in the wrong way, are going to prevent young African Americans from learning math, because math is white supremacy dominating blacks. Reading traditional books is white supremacy. Hard work, rational thought, careful planning, white supremacy. I mean, this has to be learned in order to have an opportunity for success in the U.S. Do you know what one of these critical race theory people says? They don't have to have success, because capitalism is so bound up with racism that it's going to end, and they'll be able to be paid the same as everybody else, whether they succeed or not. Because if the model is profit, they say, you're not going to work, you're not going to look at your policies to see what is most racially equitable unless you change this, and this will all be changed. Another critical race theory person says that it's unnecessary to teach writing and linear thought to minority children. Now, you do all this and you subject the black youngster to a program to deny the value of teaching what they'd like to call white values to black children. Well, whether they're white values or pink values or yellow values or black values, they're universal values. Hard work makes you more successful. Studying makes you more knowledgeable. Discipline gets the job done. Laziness does not. Being able to write is necessary to communicate at any level but the most low level in society. Being able to add is critical to moving on to anything but a low-level job. And when you talk about the achievement gap is a reflection of how, for 40 years, young African-American children have been double-crossed by the public schools and by one of the most horribly motivated organizations in this country, and in many ways one of the most racist, which is the National Association of Teachers. They don't care about children. They only care about hanging on to their jobs. Let me close with that, because I have experience with this. I believe when I was mayor of New York City that because my children went to private school, all children should have the opportunity to go to private or parochial school. And I favored a voucher program so that minority parents would have the same opportunity that I had to get involved in, find out the school, and put my kid in that school and get them out of the terrible public schools. Not all, most. I was down eventually to a vote where I was going to get it, and the teachers union threatened the board member with the teacher daughter of this board member being ruined for the rest of her life if she voted for choice. If she voted to allow African-American parents to decide where their kid goes to school, even within the public school system. I tried to change the rules so that I could pay good teachers a lot more than bad teachers, and we'd agree on an evaluation system, which isn't so hard. How many kids graduate? How many kids' scores improve? How many? I was told that tests and all this, these are signs of my racism, that I want people tested. I cannot run an organization if I can't have people tested. I cannot achieve excellence unless I can make distinctions between the people that are working for me who are doing a really good, an average, and a terrible job. I couldn't manage a baseball team if I didn't do that. Or I couldn't run a U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, my own security business. So what schools are subjected to is a communist form of management. Everybody's treated equal. The guy who's accused of sexual perversion with a child, it takes 4 years to have him removed. What I did was I prosecuted him, got him out faster. This system is destroying your children. The fact that African Americans and other minorities vote for politicians that block charter schools, vouchers, and choice is one of the reasons the children have an achievement gap. Those schools have to be changed. You're not going to get educational opportunity within the public school system. They gave up on that a long time ago. You can just see it in their lack of desire to come back and teach. Parochial schools are back for a year. They're just taken off because that desire to help the kids isn't there. You give the choice to the parents who pull all the kids out of a school. You'll see those teachers change. Unlike the theory of Marxism propounded by critical race theory and these Marxists, the key to success is also competition. And communism and socialism removes it and therefore destroys society. So there's a big battle, critical race theory. I want you to take a look at your child's school, and I want you to find out what kind of idiocy they're teaching them. Are they teaching them that learning math is an issue of white supremacy? Or learning how to do dialectical reasoning? Or believing in God? Yeah, they might. A lot of parents got real surprised during the pandemic when they started listening to the lessons. Oh my goodness, they've been doing it for years, which is why we have a achievement gap. Not because of racism, because of irresponsible, Marxist-dominated, money-overwhelmed, greedy teachers who only care about protecting themselves, protecting their job. Their union only cares about protecting the jobs of the worst ones and does nothing to get bigger salaries for the best ones. You, parents, have to break through that to save your children. White, black, Hispanic, any child. The proportions may be different just given the socioeconomics, not race. But everyone is affected by this. And this is the great civil rights issue of this generation. Can we get quality education for all our children? Yes, we can. If we can break through the Democrat Party that doesn't allow choice, the teachers' union, critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, and all the left-wingers that are together to support this union, and education is deteriorating, and the communists love it because it'll destroy America, make us hate America more, and then we will embrace communism. Well, I hope this gives you the facts that you need to really understand what's going on. This is a very dangerous time in our history, and there is more at stake today than ever before. You need to understand this, and you need to understand this in depth, because the censorship that goes on means that they tell half the picture and then they lie about the other half. Well, thank you very much, and we will be back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense very shortly.